Hello everyone, let's start. We have 40 minutes, then another 40 minutes. After that, I will go through my presentation. You'll ask questions. If there's not enough time to answer all of them, I'll be available outside. I'll try to answer everything I know, and I'll do my best to answer even questions that I don't know about. My name is Andrey, I'm head of QA from Minsk. I'm from Panda company. Every time I change these numbers for my presentation, I've been in the company for 11 years. Sometimes I'm doing testing, sometimes other things, and sometimes I'm teaching others how to test. Today, I'd like to tell you about such an interesting thing as objectives and key results, OKR in English, and how they affect and whether they affect testing at all, or it is just another fad buzzword. What this presentation is not about. This is not a ready-to-use recipe because, in fact, we are a product company and we continue using OKR. We've made some mistakes. We have many to make in future. I will answer some of the questions, but this is not the user-friendly advice. So, without further ado, I will tell you about everything that I see at the moment. My presentation will be made up of two parts. One bigger part in the beginning will be about the OKR system and how it is related to testing, and the second part of the presentation, the second 40-minute installment, because we'll have a small break between the presentations about the growth of tester, how to grow, what to look at, and so on. So if you're more interested in the system itself, this is the first part of the presentation. If you're interested in what you need to do, this is the second part of the presentation. Let's start. In fact, OKR is an instrument to manage goals and objectives. When a QA lead in some project, you might have it. If you are running the project, if you see the objectives, and when you have a QA manager, head of QA, and other interesting words, you're already linked to the company and you see its objectives much clearer. The OKR system has been designed in such a way so that not only the lead tester and sub-lead tester sees all the goals and objectives, rather all the objectives are transformed and projected on the whole company. Usually there are not more than 5 such objectives. It's clear why, because it's an objective and each objective has key results, not more than 5 also. So an example of such an objective for a mobile app, when we want to end up in the 5 top downloadable apps in App Store. We set up key results for ourselves, like to increase the number of users, for instance, by 100%, to increase the rating of the application, get 50 good feedbacks, and issue 5 new features or functions. And these objectives can be broadcast or projected to different departments, including testing department. Most important difference of this system of objective management is that any person can see the objectives that any other person has. At the high level, we see a bigger goal, and each one has his own objectives or sub-objectives, which help them achieve the bigger objective. We can just enter it and see. This way, we're breaking down the barrier when it seems like one team is doing one thing, another team is doing another, and when they meet together, they start arguing who is more important. Everyone is driving towards the same goal. An example, which is shown by the founder of OKR, who used this system in Google quite successfully. As a rule, they are Americans, they use American football here. I'm not talking about soccer, this is a totally different beast. And any team wants to win a Super Bowl, but not just to win it, but rather make some money on this as well. Aside from the endorsement, they will fill up the stadiums with spectators. So 2 big objectives is to win Super Bowl and to fill up the sporting arena by at least 88%. So these goals are projected to two departments, to the head coach and the public relations PR manager. And consequently, each one of these departments has its own sub-objectives for a bigger objective, and they can be projected both to the head coach again, when he instructs his deputies, and they can also instruct their defense team or tech team, and they have to, and quarterbacks. The whole statistics is downshifted to them, and then, of course, none of them are a guarantee that if they perform all the key results, the main objective will be accomplished. But the likelihood of that is quite high, and will be at least one step closer to achieving the goal vis-a-vis what we started with. A key thing here is that there are three directions of goal setting. One is when objectives are brought from top down, then they're transformed into department objectives. There are other objectives when the different departments get together, they see some shared goals, they vocalize them and bring up the shared objectives, and they're like side by side, and there are also bottom-up objectives when any person can suggest an objective which can end up not as a team objective but the whole business objective. I will show an example of a product company. Any product company aspires to increase their monthly app revenue. This is the product level objective. When the product sets a simple objective to improve the user experience, how can we prove that we have improved the user experience? We suggest that the new version is better. That's why we can offer X users to migrate to the new version, and introduce new features for it, and these objectives might not be projected to a product team but the whole business, and the objective which can be suggested or can be vocalized, which can be even proposed by the testing department, is to rectify some bugs. When we see let's fix a number of bugs and see what happens. Usually objectives are set per quarter. Most popular method is to do quarterly objective setting, not yearly objective setting. The initiative comes from a tester. A tester can suggest something, and potentially it can become part of the objectives and key results of a company. Consequently, here we have the first advice: propose and lead. You see the product, you see what's going on with that product, and an easy example that we had in our company, we simply have analyzed the bug backlog. We see that the number of bugs continues to grow, and our objective that we set was to rectify or fix 40 old bugs. There was a simple and straightforward objective was set by one of the product teams who were simply fixing bugs, nothing else. And we have fixed bugs, and in some way we have followed up on how it reflects on the satisfaction of users and the number of people who have abandoned our product. And these indicators really went down, which means that we fixed them good. Next option for us is to calculate the losses from this bug. There are different options how to do this. They will be discussed during this conference as well. In fact, all these methods are linked to what you consider a bug loss, or versus investments on how many man-hours and money you need to spend to fix a bug. You compare the two numbers, and you get, based on ROI, what you will do with this defect. Objectives and key results can change in the course of the period. So these are not the objectives set for 3 months and then are completely forgotten, and we recall them only during the summarization. You can, in fact, change objectives. They can permutate. I will speak more about this later, and some objectives can be simply scratched because they become obsolete or other objectives prove to be of high priority. What a tester must do in this case, you shouldn't wait for 3 months, you shouldn't wait, and if you see that the project is slowly being buried down to the ground, you just have to approach your management, show them metrics and numbers, and explain to them that there is a problem. And of course, we need to install this feature in 2 months, but 1.5 months has passed. We keep testing, keep finding X number of defects. So in the remainder of 2 weeks, it's unlikely that we'll issue this feature, or its quality will be unsatisfactory. Third advice is do not collect all the objectives by the end of the quarter. Look at the planning stage, how many or what objectives you want to accomplish in this quarter, and there might be a situation when 3-4 big features will be installed on the 30th of September, or the worst case scenario, 30th of December. Just try to imagine what a tester feels, how a tester feels about this. And this new year will unlikely end well for them. This is a simple decomposition that we can advise here, or some smaller objectives are advised here, which can be achieved within 2 months or even longer than that. Please try not to put or concentrate all your objectives and results by the end of the quarter. So QR, OKR coordinate all the work and coordinate their objectives. I will speak on about the objectives. The 3 objectives that we use in our company for QA department is to improve the product quality and the release stability, and as it usually happens, to prevent the burn down of the team. Because one can achieve the first 2 objectives, but the team will simply disband or burn out. So you have to be very attentive and sensitive to the needs of the team. Please select less number of objectives, because the quality of the product and the stability of releases are also interconnected, and the less number of objectives you have, the easier it would be for you to see the interlinkages between the objectives, as, say, one objective can affect another. And in principle, this is the progress that we have observed here in the releases and the regular percentage of bugs found by the user. With the increase of the number of releases twofold, the quality didn't go down, but even improved. But of course, it's not an everyday scenario for us. Another important thing, the closer you're to the end of the period, the clearer you need to understand what should not be done. You're approaching the end of the period, you're about to complete stuff, and then you're suggested, let's do this, let's do that. And you start spreading out your effort, and eventually you do not accomplish the objective because you micromanage little details. The principle used in OKR, I believe, is quite delicate. Why? Because the hard-to-achieve goals motivate you, but not always, especially when this objective is unattainable. So we need to maintain a balance here. On the one hand, we need to grab an objective and high-level objective, and if you do not achieve it by just 1 inch, it's better than you take too low an objective. On OKR, if you have 3-5 objectives by the end of the quarter, a good result for you would be to achieve 70% of all the objectives, not 100%. Why so? Because it allows people to set more ambitious objectives. Because if you achieve all 100% of objectives, it means simply that you were not really ambitious, which would have been achieved and accomplished without OKR. So here we need to strike a balance between the feasibility of objectives and the motivation. And one needs to clearly understand which objectives are important. Among these objectives, you will have a different classification: ambitious objectives and important objectives. Important objectives usually are the objectives which are must-haves. Ambitious objectives are something good, which can promote us further down the road. In my 3 objectives, for instance, it's clear that the objective to keep the team together is a must-have for us when we select an objective to speed up or increase the number of releases without losing on the stability or quality. We're going to issue 2 times more frequently, but you'll have 2 times more bugs. Then it's unlikely. It's not really an ambition. You need to speak to your management and find out what is of high priority to them. Often you will hear that for them quality is not the top priority, but you need to understand that the quality should not be compromised, even if you set more ambitious goals. Consequently, what needs to be done with the ambitious goals? Well, they inspire us. We can achieve them or not. Ambitious goals help us in thinking in a certain direction, not simply fix little stuff here, but maybe some things need to be changed completely.
So when you think in small goals, you need to go an extra mile and achieve your goal. With ambitious goals, you do everything that would perhaps prevent you from achieving that ambitious goal. You will have to reconstruct something. So these are the summary of all 7 goals, 7 tips that you would require, and you will pass it down to your management, and they should help you in achieving the company goals. We're going to go over OKR from the perspective of 4 superpowers. As I told you, there are important and ambitious goals. With ambitious goals, it's important to keep quality in mind. It's vital that you don't overlook something and do a poor job. If we take another sector, not IT, for example, car making, Toyota, Volkswagen, and other companies were confronted with the situation where they faced serious architectural issues that could be fatal for drivers, and they had to revoke or recall up to millions of cars. So what is suggested here? You need to have each quantity goal aligned with a quality goal. For quality goals, you can use some quality gates. In other words, during each stage, you monitor vis-a-vis the target, but you have to be careful. Perhaps it is not always enough. In other words, you may have some standard quality objectives for each product feature. If you release features, but you fail to achieve quality goals, the objective is not achieved. It's not enough to release a feature. You need to do it right. You need to do it well. With prioritization, everything is clear. Let's move on to synchronization. Synchronization is something that each tester does inside his or her company. Within their team, they always check functionality. They talk to business analysts. They also hone some peculiarities when they deal with developers. And all of that helps you approach other members of the team. You have shared objectives, and you are free to discuss with them any issues relating to how to achieve those goals. So what you can do is do management by objective and see how it differs from OKR. Unlike MBOs, where there is a top-down approach, OKRs can utilize the bottom-up approach as well. So this might help you abandon some of the goals through collective discussions. And you will have to go through this entire chain from the very bottom to the very top. And you will spend a lot of time, and a shift to green will be distorted. What is shift to green? This is where the management tries to soften your goals, and head of QA in the meantime tells you that everything is great. I understand you have come across this approach. Also, you determine yourself how many scores from 0 to 1 each goal can be assigned. Let's say you have a goal of at least 10% find rate of defect by customer. You understand that reaching 20% or 15%, there could be a world of difference between these two. This is a log difference. Each new quality percentage becomes more and more difficult to achieve, and it might cost you as much effort as you exerted before. So just to say that each extra percentage is 1/10 or something is just wrong. The last 1/10 improvement may be the most difficult to gain. Each goal has its monitors. There are timeframes and dates. You can use a variety of tools that can help you draw beautiful graphs that everybody enjoys so much. And finally, aspiration for outstanding performance. How many important goals versus how many ambitious goals you should have? Each company wants to survive. And QR may have pretty ambitious goals. They can be aware that they are not likely to grow in the next 6 months. They will be devoured by another company, and in this case all OKRs can be very ambitious. But if a company has been around on the market for quite a while, they may not have super ambitious goals at all. And if a startup may have 200% growth rate, the company that has been on the market for a long 5 to 10% growth rate might be a goal that it can achieve. Some companies are more convenient working when there is no pressure. Others enjoy operating under excessive pressures. It's important to understand what your stamina is and how long can you be motivated and driven by ambitious goals. And you should try to challenge your testing team, but not in a way like, well, this is our goal and let's give it everything we've got. No, you need to put it mildly, like, this is the goal that we should achieve, because if you don't believe in it, nobody will. Here's an example of how Intel with its microprocessor captured the market, and the only goal with the 4 key results were framed on an A5 page. I mean, nothing of a sort of a global strategy with tactics were laid down. There was one big goal and 4 key results, and they did it in under 3 months. Got rid of Motorola that we haven't seen a sign of recently. So what's important is that you have a kind of a criteria to check or verify quality of the new system. I mean, it would not lead to the collapse of the company. It's quite helpful to use doming principles. Remember the chain reaction that doming crafted. Quality improvement can lead to prosperity of a company, and a company should be mindful of 3 constituent elements, that is, being obsessed with quality drive, then evidence-based approach. I would say OKRs do not replace project-based management or some preliminary assessment of the situation. It's not enough to set a goal, move from point A to point B. Like, you will have some task decomposition and prelim assessment. And one of the most popular and catchy phrases by Mr. Doming is that a team of stars is not a star team, and a team where everyone supports each other and everyone on that team is not a star can play a very good part in the orchestra. I'm not going to dissect doming principles, but if you as a test unit leader will come across OKR or any other system, remember these principles. Remember how you can check your system, and remember about fatal diseases of the company that might lead to the company going belly up. Apart from the goals and key results, another crucial thing that is integrated in the very system is CFR. I doubt that there is something new you're going to hear now. CFR, conversations, feedback, and recognition, is something I'm sure you have heard about. And this includes working with each team member, conversing with them. You have a shared goal, so you have something of common to discuss. So you tell each other what you did, how far along have you gone, and you might have those regular weekly meetings. And in the course of such conversation, there is an exchange of feedback going on. So the feedback doesn't sit on a shelf waiting to be heard once a year, or you don't receive a letter once a year which says, remember you did this in January. Because it's been a long time ago, and feedback is something that needs to be generated forthwith, immediately. When we see the goals well formulated and when they are transparent, we realize what every person gets recognized for. Here's an example of how CFR program works. We'll cover that in the second portion of the presentation. If you don't work with your staff on one and the same project, I mean, that's perfectly okay. I mean, you could be testing head, you run several teams, and you don't necessarily follow developments in each and every team, but you should set up weekly meetings to check the lay of the land. Also, the development and testing departments should gather at least once a week to go over preliminary results or intermediary results. Also, you should have proficiency development meetings with your managers at least once in 6 months. Actually, this is not enough once in 2 quarters, because goals might change once in a quarter. So once in 6 months might not cut it. But if you meet on a weekly meeting basis and you discuss with your subordinates or with your managers the development path, you might formulate or reformulate some of your professional development or proficiency objectives. And self-analysis, self-reflection will also help. This is where you cover or discuss your goal. You help your employee understand what it takes, what needs to be done, and how achieving a particular goal will contribute to personal and professional growth. Your meetings shouldn't boil down to a reporting session and nothing more. You could request collection of matrices. If it's all about reporting, it's a sign that there's something you're doing wrong. Well, the first portion of the presentation is over. I mean, the presentation about OKR and how it impacts the company and its testing unit. In the second part, I will talk more about HR. Thank you. HR and career growth. Questions? Remember, the best question asker will be given a t-shirt. First, a preamble, an introductory question. Do you understand that KPI is something that happens now and OKR is something we're looking forward to achieve, and they are complementary? I remember a funny caricature which states they take your estimates and turn them into your deadlines. To what extent these risks are real, and how could we cope with it? We take an ambitious goal, it turns into KPI, then it turns into a commitment, and then we get beaten up for failing to achieve it. This is a very good question. Indeed, what you will require is project management. We're going to do this feature in 1 month. This is a very off-the-cuff assessment. To avoid turning it into a commitment, you need to embed or allow for some safety margin. Or you say, if you need more accurate assessment, you need to get together and discuss this feature in greater detail to see how it works. And only when the goal is fully formulated, you take up the goal. Don't start a quarter until you have clearly realized how it will work. Because otherwise you will run into a problem. You will say, we haven't taken that into account, we didn't take that on board. So management based on project is something that requires preliminary assessment that you have to carry out prior to the commencement of the quarter. I'm Natalia. Hi. You said about task setting for QA team, but what if development teams and QA teams don't share goals? How can all of these problems be aligned? How can they be not aligned? Everybody understand that anything that is being done in the production sector brings profit. So the tester's job is to make sure that the failing idea does not get tested.
But in fact, if the function works well and it works the way it should be, then there should be no problems. Because this way you also explain to the business that the rough working function or functionality will bring more frustration than satisfaction to the end user. So I see no contradiction here. Yes, speak up. I will repeat what you asked.
Mm-hmm.
Хорошо, давайте я вот как раз подформулирую вопрос.
Okay, let me reformulate the question. How to get a compliance? Well, basically, you set up your own quality goal for its objective. And if you set it, then there will be much less issues later on. How many, in other words, how many defects or bugs there can be, what functionality is considered to be functional, and what can work, what cannot work, and for what percentage of users this feature will apply, because a feature can be issued for 5% of users and the results might be different from the 100% release. So you can formulate the quality objectives simultaneously with the product objectives. Dear colleagues, our time is over. I can take one more question. There are more questions. Okay, 2 more questions then. This is more like a continuation of the previous question, because all of this looks like a micromanagement. In other words, the objectives of a separate department look to be more important than the objectives or goal of the company. I didn't do anything.